We all know the scene of the Last Supper, right? It's such a foundational moment. But what if a single, tiny word that's often added to the story changes, well, everything? Today, we're going to dig deep into the biblical text to uncover a worldview that's been mostly forgotten, one that reframes not just the Last Supper, but the very nature of reality itself. Okay, let's just jump right into the puzzle. When we hear Last Supper, our brains automatically fill in the phrase New Covenant. But here's the thing. The oldest manuscripts we have for the Gospels of Matthew and Mark, they don't actually use the word new. They just say the blood of the covenant. Paul's letter to the Corinthians is really the only early account where New Covenant is a sure thing. So that tells us that a whole lot of early Christians understood this moment not as starting something brand new, but as fulfilling the covenant. So the question becomes, which one? Matthew's Gospel, which was likely written for a Jewish Christian audience, gives us our first absolutely crucial clue. The text flat out connects this covenant to the forgiveness of sins. Now, this isn't just some vague generic promise. It's a specific job description. And that clue right there is going to be our guide as we start looking for the original covenant being talked about here. So you can see it laid out pretty clearly right here. The earliest tellings we have in Matthew and Mark just say blood of the covenant. Paul, writing a bit later, says new covenant. Now, this isn't necessarily a contradiction, but it does point to a really complex tradition. So what we're going to do is follow that earliest thread. If it's not explicitly called a new covenant, then which existing one is it? So this is our central mystery. We have our main clue from Matthew that this covenant is all about the forgiveness of sins. So let's play detective. Let's go through the major covenants of the Old Testament and see if any of them match the description. All right, our search begins with the four big historic covenants. You know them, the one with Noah, promising never to flood the earth again, the one with Abraham, promising land and descendants, the one at Sinai with Moses and the giving of the law, and finally the one with David, promising an eternal dynasty. So let's check each one against our clue. And we immediately hit a brick wall. Think about it. The Noahic covenant, that's about keeping creation stable. Abraham's, it's about family and real estate. Sinai is all about obedience to the law. And David's is about the royal succession. They're all incredibly important, don't get me wrong, but not a single one has forgiveness of sins as its main point. Our key clue doesn't match any of the usual suspects, which kind of suggests we might be looking in the wrong place entirely. So it seems the answer isn't finding another historical deal. It's about uncovering a completely different way of seeing the world. Scholars have found that there were two distinct, and sometimes even competing, theologies running through the Old Testament. And to solve our puzzle, we have to pull back the curtain on the one that's been almost completely forgotten. First up, we have what's called Deuteronomic theology. This is the one we're probably most familiar with. It's all about history, the story of Israel, the Exodus, and being obedient to the law that Moses received at Sinai. But there was another major worldview running alongside it, temple or priestly theology. And its focus wasn't history, it was creation. Its goal wasn't just obedience to rules, but maintaining the harmony of the entire cosmos. This difference in worldview is so huge, it actually changes the meaning of key Hebrew words. Take the word for remember. For the Deuteronomist, to remember God means to recall the historical events, like the Exodus. But for a priest in the temple, that same word can mean to actually invoke God's presence, to make it manifest, or cleave to God. In Deuteronomy, that means obey the commandments. But in the temple's mystical side, it means to achieve a kind of union with the divine. And you can see this clash of worldviews perfectly in the two different reasons given for keeping the Sabbath. In Exodus, the reason is rooted in creation. God rested on the seventh day. So you're supposed to align with that cosmic pattern. But in Deuteronomy, the reason is historical. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. It's about a specific event in Israel's past. Same commandment, two totally different worldviews behind it. It's inside this second creation-focused worldview, this temple theology, that we finally find our missing covenant. This isn't a covenant that was made in history. It's the one that holds history itself together. The Hebrew term for it is Beret Olam. Now, we often translate that as everlasting covenant. But the root word, olam, can also mean hidden or secret. So in the world of the temple, this wasn't some historical treaty. It was the secret, timeless bonds that hold the very fabric of creation together. It's the fundamental operating system of reality. And the laws of this covenant are called halfichi, which literally means something engraved. These weren't rules written down on stone tablets later on. No, these were the divine blueprints, the patterns that were engraved into reality before the visible world was even formed. They're what sets the boundaries for the sea, the path for the stars, and the proper place for every single thing in the cosmos. So what happens when this kind of covenant gets broken? Well, the prophet Isaiah paints a pretty chilling picture. He says when humanity violates these engraved statutes, the chuak, the result isn't just a legal punishment. The creation itself starts to unravel. The earth withers, the cosmos starts to collapse. In this view, sin is nothing less than a cosmic catastrophe. This just completely reframes the whole idea of sin. In this priestly worldview, sin isn't really about disobeying a list of rules. It's about the abuse of divine knowledge, secrets of creation that were revealed by rebellious spiritual beings, what we'd call fallen angels, which then shatters the built-in unity of the cosmos. And if you look at texts from this tradition, like the Book of Enoch, it lists what these specific sins are. And just look at them: making weapons, corrupting arts like cosmetics that lead to fornication, destructive medicine. These aren't about breaking the Ten Commandments. These are acts that misuse creative knowledge to warp, corrupt, and damage the created order itself. So, if sin is the fragmentation of the cosmic order, then salvation has to be the restoration of that order. And this forgotten worldview gives us a profound new way to understand the whole concept of atonement. We see this cosmic worldview pop right back up in the New Testament. When Paul writes in his letter to the Colossians that in Christ all things hold together, he isn't just being poetic. He is using the precise language of this ancient temple theology. He's basically describing Christ as the embodiment of the Brit Olam, the very bond that keeps creation from collapsing into chaos. And you see this identification all over the scriptures. John's logos is the vessel that contains all life and light. Paul's firstborn in Colossians is the one in whom all things were created and are held together. And get this, Isaiah's servant isn't just the party to the covenant, he himself is the covenant, the living, breathing bond of creation. So the goal, then, is one. It's unity. It's the restoration of the oneness of being that got shattered by the abuse of knowledge. It's all about bringing the fragmented, broken pieces of creation back into their original, harmonious relationship with each other and with their Creator. This gives us a totally new definition of atonement. It's not primarily a legal transaction, like paying off a debt. It is a cosmic act of repair. It is the mending of the breach in the everlasting covenant. It's the work of a high priest, making a broken creation whole again. And this brings us right back to where we started. The blood of the covenant poured out for the forgiveness of sins isn't about starting a new historical contract. It's the high priestly act of atonement that repairs the original eternal covenant of creation, healing the damage that was done on a cosmic level. So you can really see the massive paradigm shift here. We move from thinking of covenant as a sort of historical deal made with a specific nation to seeing it as the fundamental fabric of all reality, the very bonds that hold the universe together. By focusing almost entirely on the historical Deuteronomic worldview, we may have completely missed this cosmic, creation-based theology that gives such a deep context to key New Testament ideas. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. If an entire way of understanding God and the world could be overshadowed and almost lost, what other foundational ideas might we be missing, just hidden in plain sight inside these ancient texts?